Also learn more about the victims, 14 people he killed, and what you need to know about today's Sugar Bowl game. All of that for you just a click away, WWLTV.com. Our live coverage does continue here throughout the morning, but first we want to take a brief break, get over to Alexa, and a check of today's forecast.
Yeah, just about 10 o'clock this morning. We do have a cool rest of your week on the way. Pretty quiet weather for today. Some sunshine, though it has been a cold start to our morning. You'll need the jackets and sweatshirts today if you will be out and about. We'll be mostly dry the next several days. Our next big chance for some rain and storms will be on Sunday, where we could see some stronger storms and a warm up, and then we get even colder next week. It's just all over the place when it comes to the weather, so make sure you're staying tuned for the latest. Right now temperatures are in the 40s and 50s, so it is chilly, but sunshine is out there and it's making it feel pretty warm in the sun, though when you're in the shade it is pretty chilly outside. Temperatures will be in the 60s this afternoon. Nice seasonable January day, very comfortable. Tonight we'll see mostly cloudy skies. Clouds will increase this evening. Temperatures will be in the 50s tonight, so we still have that chill in the air in the evening. And with the clouds moving in tonight, there is a small chance for a couple isolated showers late tonight and during the overnight hours through early tomorrow morning, though they are going to be light, spotty, and hit or miss. Most of us will be dry, but there could be a few sprinkles around early tomorrow morning. Tomorrow we'll start with clouds, and then sunshine comes tomorrow afternoon. Cool and nice in the first part of the day tomorrow, and then mild in the afternoon in the mid 60s. So a really wonderful day again tomorrow. So here's a look at your Thursday. We'll expect increasing clouds not until late tonight and overnight. There are those spotty little showers, especially on the South Shore overnight through early tomorrow morning. Tomorrow does begin with some clouds, but we'll have sunshine on the way as a weak cool front moves in later tomorrow. So it will be a little chillier on Saturday in the low 60s, just a couple degrees cooler. Clouds return for Saturday. Also small little showers around late Saturday, but very hit or miss. We actually will be mostly dry and very nice the next few days. It's not until Sunday that a more impactful system moves in across the lower Mississippi Valley. That's when we'll have some steady rain and a few stronger thunderstorms rolling in Sunday later in the day in the afternoon evening time frame. Heavier downpours are possible, especially north of the lake, and some severe weather could be moving in as well. And then a really strong cold front pushes all the rain and storms away, and then it brings us windy, cold, and blustery days starting on Monday with a prolonged stretch of very bitter weather next week. Before we get to it, though, there is a risk for severe weather, like I mentioned, for the lower Mississippi Valley. Parts of the North Shore are included, but this severe weather risk may be expanded southward. We will see, but plan for just at least a few scattered to strong to severe storms later Sunday in the afternoon evening time frame. Of course, we'll bring you the latest updates with that. Behind that or after that is going to be that really strong cold front, bringing us several rounds of chilly air next week. And then later next week into the second weekend of January, so January 10th, 11th, may get even colder with a really deep Arctic surge of air possibly coming down into the deep south. So still some time between now and then to hammer out those details. Make sure you stay tuned and just plan for a very, very cold week next week. Low temperatures will be in the upper 20s on the North Shore for many mornings next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. On the South Shore, we'll see temperatures in the lower 30s. So it's going to be just at the freezing mark or just above the freezing mark for a couple mornings on the South Shore, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week. So we'll have some frost possible south of the lake going into next week for several mornings, and then on the North Shore we'll see maybe those hard freeze conditions for several mornings next week. So here we go with the next couple days. Temperatures in the 60s, very comfortable and nice, still keeping the chilly nights and mornings. We warm up briefly on Sunday into the 70s with that round of rain and storms later in the day, maybe some stronger storms later Sunday as well. And then next week, cold and windy, temperatures only in the 40s in the afternoons. Guys.
We interrupt with breaking news from WWL Louisiana.
And good morning to all of you. Thank you for sticking with us as we continue our breaking news coverage of the deadly terrorist attack that happened as the very early morning hours of New Year's Day. We're continuing our coverage here on air as you stay with us here as we are waiting for officials, including Governor Jeff Landry and other notable agencies like the FBI, who's taken over this investigation, NOPD, ATF, a number of others. We are expecting that update from them in just a short while and the very latest into this attack.
If you are joining us on WWL, we are rejoining you here. We continue our live coverage, though, online on WWL Plus as we await a briefing that's set to take place at 10 a.m. That attack left 15 people dead, including the person responsible for causing all of this, the driver of the truck. Want to get to a live picture right now, as you see here on your screen, of that press conference that's set to take place within the 10 a.m. hour. We are monitoring that shot as you see here. Reporters standing by. The governor governor and other local officials are going to update us on this investigation as soon as they get to that podium. We will take it live. But as we do prepare for that press conference, we do want to walk you through the very latest on this investigation. What we do know here, after a man plowed his pickup truck into a crowd of people, killing 14 innocent people. This video here documenting when the act of terror began on Canal Street at Bourbon last night. At that point, the driver making an abrupt turn, going around an NOPD police car that was there to block traffic, running over people as a result. You hear those sirens and the mayhem that followed there as people were celebrating the new year. That suspect then shot at NOPD officers who returned fire, killing him. Those 2 officers were hit, but they are recovering this morning. We know right now about the person behind the wheel of that truck who is dead. Again, here is his picture. He is 42-year-old Shamsud Din Jabbar, an American citizen born and raised in Beaumont, Texas, but was living outside of the Houston area, according to authorities. A veteran of the U.S. Army also, but here are the specifics about what may have motivated him. Authorities do confirm that an ISIS flag was attached to the truck he used in the attack, and we also know, according to officials, that that truck appears to have been rented. We are told that inside that truck, authorities found weapons, a gun, a long gun with a silencer, also other explosive devices found in the truck as well.
And this morning, New Orleans police remain stationed outside of an Airbnb in the St. Roch neighborhood. Take a look at this video just into the newsroom from Mandeville Street. Yesterday, residents were told were evacuated from their homes for several hours while authorities were investigating that Airbnb and the possible connection to the suspect in this terrorist attack. We've also learned that 7 of the 14 victims, we now know their names, they've been identified.
And here they are here: Nikira Dedo, Nicole Perez, Tiger Besh, Reggie Hunter, Matthew Tenedorio, Kareem Boaudi, and Hubert Gautreaux.
People around New Orleans and across the country looking for ways that they can support the victims, families of this tragic attack, those victims who are still in the hospital recovering, and, you know, so many people just wanting to do something, do good in a very dark situation.
What you can do right now is donate your blood, and it is needed at an already critical time. There is a special emergency blood drive set up today as they're asking for donations following this tragedy. Our Meg Ferris was live from the Blood Center's headquarters yesterday. You saw those empty coolers, and because of that, many of you showed up yesterday. Dozens of you lined up outside the office in Metairie to donate. And if you would like to do the same today, here are the options on your screen. All of them in the New Orleans area are open until 7 this evening. A couple exceptions here: the Pelican Athletic Club in Mandeville, also the Blood Center's corporate office. They both close at 5. There's also the New Orleans St. Vincent de Paul Center. That location, it's on Canal Street, and it's closing at 6. Also, ways you can help: the United Way of Southeast Louisiana. It is accepting donations for victims. All of the money raised, 100% of it, we are told, will go toward victims and their families. If you would like to support, we do have a link for you on our website this morning.
You can also help by donating to the Greater New Orleans Foundation. They've launched a New Year's Day tragedy fund to help the victims of the attack. Saints player Cam Jordan announced that he's donating $25,000 to the fund. He also called on the city of New Orleans to do the same and help however they can.
Crews arrived early this morning to start the process of removing debris, cleaning up Bourbon Street, which essentially sat frozen in time after the attack.
Yeah. Our Leah McNeil has been near the corner of Bourbon and Canal Street. She's been giving us a look at just where that stands at this point. As you mentioned, those out there working to clean it up. And she's joining us live with more on the work that is underway to get Bourbon eventually reopened. Good morning, Leah.
Hey guys, good morning. Yeah, just within the last 30 minutes, I want to say we have seen additional units arrive here on scene. That includes some Jefferson Parish units. You see this search and rescue vehicle, which is right at the intersection of Canal and Bourbon. There were 2 of these vehicles. Another one is since has driven up Bourbon right now, assumingly continuing to kind of help with those cleanup efforts, because as we do know, there are plans to reopen Bourbon Street at some point in time today. We do not have a clear timeline as to when that will happen, but those plans are in the works right now. Since early this morning, we've been out here since about midnight and have been seeing crews kind of going in and out of Bourbon Street. That includes those IV waste crews. That also includes different crews that are continuing to remove debris from the scene. We did see a car that was hauling a mangled motorized wheelchair that was assumingly involved in this incident, and also the construction crane that was ultimately the thing that stopped the man that federal agents have identified as 42-year-old Shamsud Din Jabbar from driving any further down Bourbon Street. He did make it 3 blocks when he swerved around an NOPD officer at the intersection of Bourbon and Canal, ultimately driving on the sidewalk and killing 14 people before he opened fire on officers. NOPD Superintendent Ann Kirkpatrick did say that officers did return fire. 2 of those officers were hit, but we've since been told that they are expected to make a full recovery. Now this morning, again, still an active scene out here right now. As you see several law enforcement agencies behind us, we also have seen several National Guardsmen out here that Governor Jeff Landry has called in to, of course, enhance security presence out here in the quarter and around the downtown area. That still is the case here this morning, but again, we're still waiting for the word on when Bourbon Street will reopen. Hopefully we'll get more information on that and the latest of this investigation. We do hear from the governor within this hour. Sending it back to you all in the studio.
All right, Leah, thank you. Leah, mentioning the governor with those National Guardsmen, the governor getting a tour of Bourbon Street this morning with those National Guardsmen. Amidst the questions about this investigation and the person responsible for all of this, why did he do it is the big question.
Yeah, that's something that we are still working to learn more about, but we have learned some of the details of his life, and we're still working to figure out if there is any connection to New Orleans, why this city was the one that was chosen. Mike McDaniel, though, has been following this closely all morning long and is giving us the very latest, including, Mike, the sweep that investigators were able to finish up a few hours ago of his home in Houston.
Yeah, and hopefully at that news conference from the governor here is to start in a few minutes, we'll get some answers to some of those questions you were talking about a possible connection to New Orleans, maybe why he chose New Orleans. So we're certainly going to be paying attention to what comes out of that. In regards to that raid that you were mentioning in Houston, the FBI over in the Houston area has now given the all clear when it comes to the search of that suspect's home and saying that there's no threat to residents in that area. I want to back up just a little bit before we get into details about the suspect's life. You were talking about the process of getting Bourbon Street cleaned up. We actually have a really good vantage point from where we are here at Dumaine and Bourbon in regards to how the street now looks versus what it did when we first got here. From what Leah's shot was showing a little bit earlier, we can see all the way down Bourbon right now. You don't see trash at all. That was not the case when we got out here extremely early this morning. Trash was still piled up along in the gutters as well as the sidewalks, just as Brandon mentioned, just frozen in time. And then the cleaning trucks kind of came through. They did 2 or 3 different sweeps through here with sweeper trucks, water trucks, as well as the trash trucks, just picking it all up. And it was interesting to watch just to see how quickly they were able to get everything cleared up. So let's talk about the suspect that the investigation is centered around. He is that 42-year-old identified as Shamsud Din Jabbar. Of course, he does have some military background, was in the U.S. Army. He was a graduate of the University of Georgia. According to an Army spokesman, Jabbar was a human resource specialist and information technology specialist from 2007 to 2015. He served in the Army Reserves. He was an IT specialist from 2015 to 2020. He even deployed to Afghanistan for most of 2009 and rose to the rank of staff sergeant by the end of service. We did speak to one of his fellow soldiers, Peter Heap, who took an IT class with Jabbar back in 2010 and says Jabbar was top of his class.
From day one, you can tell that his knowledge in the IT field was better than everyone else's. I still thought that he was still a somewhat good guy. He was genuine. He was nice. I would not categorize him as being a Muslim extremist at that time when I knew him. Not at all. I think sometime between when I knew him and now, he got radicalized.
Back out here, we have the camera zoomed in down Bourbon Street. We're about 9 blocks away from Canal, but you can see one of those military trucks that are that were brought in to be part of this deployment of the military personnel here in the state of Louisiana by the governor. Of course, the governor, you mentioned, was out here a little bit earlier, to kind of touring the damage, or touring Bourbon Street, getting an assessment of what's to come. Of course, we look forward to seeing what is going to come out of this news conference, to hopefully, Bree, answer some of those questions that you were mentioning in regards to why he chose New Orleans, what connections he had to New Orleans, and of course, whether anyone else was involved in this terrorist attack. Live in the quarter, Mike McDaniel, WWL Louisiana, guys.
All right, Mike, thank you so much. You know, we're just a few moments away now from this press conference starting, that we have stayed on air in order to bring you the very latest in this investigation into this terrorist attack here in New Orleans. As we mentioned, those officials are expected to give that update of the very latest and hopefully get some of those answers to the questions that, as Mike and we have been mentioning all morning long.
Yeah, all morning long. Also, since yesterday, that press briefing is set up over at the Benson Tower across the street from the Superdome, where the Sugar Bowl is set to take place at 3 p.m. today. Governor Landry and other emergency officials and local leaders are expected to be there at that press conference to bring us the very latest on what we know there. As far as proximity is concerned, because we just had those two live shots from Mike McDaniel, also Leah McNeil. They represent the line of Bourbon Street that is closed off, as we take a live look there at the press conference, waiting for officials to take the podium, and once they do, we will take this live. But again, where Mike was positioned on the back end of the French Quarter, Bourbon and Dumaine, Leah some 8 blocks on the other side at Canal Street, that entire strip there has been closed. But as we have seen, as we do continue to listen in, the audio you hear there is that of the press conference. Officials have cleared Canal Street, the debris and whatnot that was there after they closed it, now taken off the street.
Yeah, we watched as Governor Landry, along with National Guard members and members of other agencies there, walked down that path. And so we're hoping from this press conference to hear a little bit more, because I think there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered. But also, you know, with the Sugar Bowl today, kicking off at 3 o'clock. 1 o'clock is the time when the Superdome will open. And again, if you are headed out there, they're asking everybody to get there as soon as possible, because there are a lot of safety measures being put in place. But as we're learning more about the connection that, you know, this could have with the explosion that happened in Las Vegas, possible connection with potentially another military veteran, there's so many other elements coming out nationally from this, that this is becoming such a large story, one that has already impacted us so severely here across our area. We're still waiting to hear about those who are in the hospital. We're still waiting to hear more about 8 victims who have yet to be identified. There are a lot of pieces to this puzzle, I think, that people of New Orleans deserve answers to. And so hopefully, you know, we'll get a little bit of that this morning, but that is why we've stayed on air with you for several hours. That's why we're cutting in here now at 10 o'clock, because we just want to help piece this together, because the families deserve that. The people of New Orleans deserve that. And again, we're waiting on that press conference to start. Governor Jeff Landry and officials from the FBI, LSP, NOPD, ATF, U.S. Attorney's Office, they're all going to be joining together. And so there's a lot of elements here that could hopefully be covered.
Because not only are there critical questions about the investigation and where it stands, there are also critical questions about security and the future, particularly when it comes to the crown jewel of New Orleans, but also as far as infrastructure and industry are concerned, the tourism industry. That's what drives the economic force of this city. And so with that, you do have a perception that you have to protect. We'll get to that in a second, but part of that concern, what you see here, these bollards, which were put in place a few years ago as part of a $40 million investment here, federal grant dollars. And the idea was to put these bollards in place to restrict traffic from Bourbon Street during highly trafficked times, so that what happened yesterday would not happen. Now, this was brought to question yesterday. Where were they? According to several officials who do confirm, those bollards weren't even there, because they took them down to repair them. They weren't operational. So officials told us that they had plans for them to be in place by the time of the Super Bowl, but there are questions about that. Governor Jeff Landry expressed frustration too. Do want to get to that shot there over downtown, the press conference slated to begin.
Yeah, let's check in now, and it seems that we have Superintendent Ann Kirkpatrick, who may be stepping to the podium first. Of course, NOPD, just one of many assets there at the press conference. And we are waiting for them to step to the podium there so we can listen in. It seems like they might still be preparing, talking to Ann Kirkpatrick, talking to a member of LSP there. So a number of different agencies who we hope to be able to hear from and get some of those updates. Maybe to the point that you just raised right there, because that's a lot of taxpayer dollars for people who put that money towards being kept safe. And there's a number of families who were unsure where their loved one was and then got horrific news.
One answer is asked to that. One of the things the governor hinted at was finding some type of funding source for maintenance of security measures down there, those bollards potentially too, so that there is a plan in place to make sure that they're maintained and not a situation as we've seen now, those bollards not in place. Superintendent Kirkpatrick, to that point yesterday, said that that's why they had that NOPD squad car there at the intersection of Canal and Bourbon. But as we've seen now in that surveillance video showing the driver of the truck approach Bourbon Street, making that sharp right onto onto Bourbon Street, running over people in the process as he accelerated down the street.
Yeah, so, so many elements to this here that I think just caused a lot of us to just feel sick to our stomachs, especially when you talk about that video, when you see him driving and make that turn. There was an NOPD vehicle that was there in order, as you said, to block that, but obviously he was able to go around it, and it just unfolded into such a horrific thing, just a terror attack. Now, I saw somebody commented on my Facebook, and I resonated with it when I asked, just sort of about how people were feeling today. And one of the comments was, it hurts that now our city is one of those that will forever be touched by terrorism. And I think a lot of people waking up today feeling that sentiment. Of course, we're still figuring out exactly why this attack played out here in New Orleans. We've learned that the terrorist, the suspect here involved, potentially lived in Houston, had grown up in Texas and Beaumont, and so what's the connection here to New Orleans? We don't know at this point.
And the video we're looking at right now is from Houston, Harris County, Texas. Investigators sweeping the suspect's home there, as you can see. We don't know what they uncovered potentially there or any other information, but again, as this investigation spans multiple states this morning, the home of the person responsible for this, the man who drove his truck down Bourbon Street, killing 14 people. Authorities are combing through his home this morning in the Houston area as they work to answer the question as to why he did this. What was his motivation here? We also had some video earlier of Governor Jeff Landry walking down Bourbon Street this morning for the first time after the attack on that day to get an idea of where things stand. The governor was very direct about making sure that there are permanent solutions here as far as the maintenance of safety is concerned. That is that video from the 8 o'clock hour this morning. The governor, also National Guardsmen and other officials walking along Bourbon Street, which remains closed. The governor wanting to get a better idea of how things look here, but also the scope of the investigation scene, which again spans some 8 blocks, because where Lee is reporting at Canal and Bourbon, juxtapose that to where Mike McDaniel is reporting 8 blocks there at Dumaine and Bourbon, where authorities yesterday found explosive devices. And while the man who is responsible for all of this didn't make it to the end of the road, there was ultimately stopped there by that device in the middle of the street, that cherry picker. Presumably there were plans to go even further had he not been stopped there.
Yeah, and it was the I don't even know the proper name for it, that crane that's, whatever stopped him there, and you just have to thank God for that, whatever, could have unfolded further. And we're showing you Governor Jeff Landry there as he walked down Bourbon earlier this morning. We do want to check in on the press conference as we're waiting. It seems that he stepped to the podium, and so we're going to go ahead and check in now and get that update from officials, including Governor Jeff Landry, on this terror attack on Bourbon Street.
All state buildings at half-mast in honor of those lives that were lost in this horrific act of violence. I also think that it's important to remember that what happened yesterday was akin to those who are old enough to remember jigsaw puzzles. And that you would take a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and you empty the box, and you've got to start sifting through those pieces, and you want to start if you were real good, you started at the corners, right? Tried to put your corners together. And from yesterday to today, over 1,000 law enforcement agents and officers, men and women, have been poring over countless amounts of data, of videos, of surveillances, interviews, tracking down every possible lead that came to us, whether it was the New Orleans Police Department, the Louisiana State Police, the FBI, or our other federal agencies. Also yesterday, I issued an emergency declaration. That declaration was meant to streamline resources and communications between state, local, and federal partners. And we're seeing the results of it. I also would like to remind everyone that what's going on in this city and this state is twofold. We've got an active criminal investigation going on, while we're also continuing to secure the city in preparation for 3 o'clock kickoff time for the Sugar Bowl. With that, I would also remind those who are in the city that as far as state resources are concerned, we have the Louisiana State Police, the Louisiana National Guard, which was part of that emergency declaration, which allowed us to put an entire MP company on the ground. Those become force multipliers, is what we call that in law enforcement and the military. That helps to add to the resources that we have. Wildlife and Fisheries, the Department of Corrections, DSF, DHS, our Veterans Affairs, our Probation and Parole, all state agencies. Any state agency who has post-certified officers are here in this city to help secure the city. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to Christopher Rea, who is the Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI's Counter Terrorism Division. Chris?
Thank you, Governor Landry. Good morning. I am FBI's Deputy Assistant Director, Christopher Rea. I'm from our Counterterrorism Division at headquarters. I'm also joined by Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Alethea Duncan, from our New Orleans office, who you heard from yesterday. I'm here to discuss not only the latest investigative information we have here in New Orleans, but I'll also let you know about other investigative activities outside of the state. I first, and most importantly, want to send our deepest condolences to the victims of this horrific attack and their loved ones. 14 innocent victims were killed in this senseless attack, and at least 35 are injured. We cannot ease the grief people in this community and across the nation are feeling at this time, but rest assured, we stand with you and in support of you. All the resources, and I'm going to go into that a little bit later, all the resources of the FBI are being focused on tracking down every piece of evidence, every lead, every interview, every potential lead we've got. While I won't be able to answer all your questions today, my goal is to be as forthcoming as possible with you on what we've uncovered so far. First and foremost, let me be very clear about this point. This was an act of terrorism. It was premeditated and an evil act. This was obviously a critical incident, and with that, lots of information and tips come pouring in from law enforcement, first responders, and the public. We have been aggressively running down these tips and information. As you all know, that takes time, and we will continue to do so until every lead has been followed through on. This investigation is only a little more than 24 hours old. So I ask you to keep in mind that as I go through some of the specifics later. But at this point, currently, and this is another fact I want to be clear on, We do not assess at this point that anyone else involved in this attack except for Shamsud Din Jabbar, the subject you've already been briefed on. A little bit about what the FBI is doing. So we are surging people and assets to the area from across the region and across the nation. Special agents in multiple field offices across the country have been deployed and are assisting with potential aspects of this investigation and following up on every lead. Additional teams of special agents, professional staff, and victim specialists continue to arrive to provide more investigative power and assistance to the victims and their families. We have also forward deployed a number of our critical incident response group assets, including members of our hostage rescue team, special agent bomb technicians, and crisis management coordinators. In addition, we have deployed more evidence response technicians to continue to process the various scenes that we have. So far, we have received just over 400 tips from the public, and that information is being followed up on both here in New Orleans and across the country. Some of the tips are here in New Orleans, and there are other tips in other states across the country that we are following up on. The FBI team and our law enforcement partners here are also reviewing hundreds of hours of surveillance and other video from both the French Quarter and other locations. As for a timeline, at this point, investigators believe Jabbar picked up the rented F-150 in Houston, Texas on December 30th. He then drove from Houston to New Orleans on the evening of the 31st, and he posted several videos to an online platform proclaiming his support for ISIS. There were 5 videos posted on Jabbar's Facebook account, which are time-stamped beginning at 1:29 a.m. and the last at 3:02 a.m. In the first video, Jabbar explains he originally planned to harm his family and friends, but was concerned the news headlines would not focus on the, quote, war between the believers and the disbelievers, end quote. Additionally, he stated he had joined ISIS before this summer. He also provided a will and testament. FBI and ATF. FBI. We have a couple different scenes at the location. We have released the scene at Bourbon Street. That scene has been released. We also have a scene off of Mandeville address, where we're currently searching that scene right now. FBI and ATF agents have secured that house, and that location is being searched for potential evidence. On New Year's morning, Jabbar opened fire after ramming through a blocked-off area of Bourbon Street, used his truck as a weapon to run over the victims. Teams of specially trained victim specialists, again, as I said, are on the ground here in New Orleans, assisting survivors of the attack and loved ones of the deceased. We do not believe the public is in any danger around any of these locations. 3 phones linked to Jabbar have been recovered, and digital media exploitation is a priority to see what is on the devices and determine if there are any other potential leads. Additionally, we have recovered 2 laptops and are currently reviewing them for any potential leads. Those laptops were recovered at the Mandeville address. Evidence technicians will also be going over the F-150 truck Jabbar was driving. As you know, we recovered an ISIS flag from the back of the vehicle. Jabbar declared his support for the terrorist group on social media, as I stated before, as he made his way to New Orleans. FBI bomb technicians also recovered 2 IEDs in coolers, one from the cross-section of Bourbon and Orleans Street, and the second at an intersection approximately 2 blocks away. There were multiple reports of other devices. Those reports turned out to be misinformation or not actual functioning devices. Those are the only 2 devices that we've been able to recover that were functional. Both devices were rendered safe on scene. We did obtain surveillance footage showing Jabbar placing the devices where they were found. As I said before, 2 other items of interest were determined not to be IEDs. A little bit about Jabbar. Jabbar himself was born in the United States and is a U.S. military veteran. We are looking in everything in his life. While we have interviewed many people who know Jabbar, we still need to talk to others. Whether you know Jabbar personally, worked with him, served in the military, or saw him in New Orleans or Texas, we need to talk to you. You may not think you have relevant information, but what you know could tie in to one of our investigative leads. Specifically, we want to talk to anyone who was in the French Quarter on New Year's Eve or early on New Year's Day. That includes people spotted near one of the 2 IEDs on Bourbon Street. The IED was inside a cooler, and many people stopped and looked at the cooler and then continued on their way. Let's be clear, again, we do not believe at this point these people are involved in this incident in any way. We want to speak to them as witnesses and want to know what they saw and when. I went down to the crime scene last night. It is very hard to put into words what it looked like and how difficult it was to see. Anyone with information can call us at 1-800-CALL-FBI or send digital tips to fbi.gov/Bourbon Street attack. Early this morning, evidence response teams finished their work at the crime scene. Bourbon Street has been turned over to the city of New Orleans. As you know, there's also an FBI investigation in Las Vegas. We are following up on all potential leads and not ruling everything out. However, at this point, there is no definitive link between the attack here in New Orleans and the one in Las Vegas. And again, I'll preface everything with what I started with in the beginning, which was this is very early in an investigation like this. Again, our thoughts and prayers are with the victims of this tragedy and everyone impacted across the country. They remain at the heart of our investigation. I also, although I've only been on the ground here a short time, I also want to express a sincere appreciation for our partners here, which include the U.S. Attorney's Office, HSI, ATF, the New Orleans PD, the Louisiana State Police, the Governor's Office, and countless others. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to the Special Agent in charge of ATF here, Josh Jackson.
Hey, good afternoon. As stated, my name is Joshua Jackson. I am the Special Agent in charge for the ATF New Orleans Field Division. And ATF's primary mission is preventing, reducing, and solving violent crime throughout the United States and abroad. The solving part is the focus of this investigation. ATF resources that have been brought to bear to the city and to focus with our federal, state, and local partners have been our national response team. We spoke about the scene that's still being processed now. The national response team of ATF is a team of certified fire investigators, certified explosive specialists, fire engineers, electrical engineers. These folks will give us additional investigative leads to help the investigative team identify what happened at the location in Mandeville and identify how that fire started and move the investigation forward from there. Additional resources that ATF has brought to bear into the city. There's our ATF Special Response Team. This is a tactical team capable of handling any sort of enforcement operation. This team is deployed, on set, and ready for the Sugar Bowl today. This team is also made available to the Louisiana State Police and also New Orleans Police Department to assist with any efforts that they may have during this period. Additional resources, as the governor alluded to, we executed executive powers and had an emergency declared to where ATF was able to tap in to Emergency Support Function 13 resources. This allowed us to bring additional explosive detection canines so that we can safely sweep the city and safely sweep the Super Bowl in preparation for the game today. These resources will still be in the city as we lead up to the Super Bowl and through Mardi Gras. These type of ATF resources will be here. The last resources the ATF has brought to bear, probably the most important one, there's our victim witness coordinators. These folks come in and they provide resources to the victims and the family members that have suffered greatly during this tragedy. The entire city hurts, but the victims and the family members are in need of resources and care long after this investigation wraps up. This time next year, to be hard for the families and friends who suffered during this event. So our victim witness coordinators are working with the FBI, the City of New Orleans coordinators to provide resources to these folks out here. And as we move forward, ATF will be committed. We will work with the investigative team moving this investigation forward, but also we'll be here to make sure the city is safe and prepared as we move into the Super Bowl. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our mayor of this great city, New Orleans. Madam Mayor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, good morning once again. And I just want to just echo my thank yous to the unified command of our law enforcement partners and at every single level, federal, state, and governor. Governor, thank you for your partnership. Thank you. I also want to thank the residents and the visitors of the city of New Orleans for your patience, for your support, and most of all, your prayers. Our hearts and prayers continue to go out to the victims' families, and the city of New Orleans, we're resilient. And as I stated on yesterday, my focus in terms of a priority has been on our victims. As you heard, that yes, the FBI was able to clear Bourbon Street. And what that meant also for me in this city was that we were able to remove our victims, identify them, and notify their families. Real reverence. They mattered, the families matter, and matter to the city of New Orleans. In addition to that, I want to just thank again our federal partners in Washington, listening to my plea personally for the additional resources to allow for the scene to be cleared, and again, attending to our victims. I walked by each one, and I did the sign of cross in my own way, because reverence, again, is important. So while we have been able to have Bourbon Street returned back to the city of New Orleans, and the due diligence has been done, that then allowed me to give the go-ahead to begin the cleaning of Bourbon Street. That started happening in the morning about 2 a.m. It was completed before 8 a.m. this morning. But that has really set the tone, I would say, and with the confidence that I have in the law enforcement partners, all of the resources that have been activated, how we have made sure that safety continues to be our top priority, how our assets have been deployed strategically, again, for the safety and the protection of our visitors and our residents in the city. And because of that, the confidence is there to reopen Bourbon Street to the public prior to game time today. The first order will be to allow for vendors to come in and service the businesses. That's important in order for us to stand up activation, as you know, Governor. And so with that, I want to reassure the public that the city of New Orleans is not only ready for game day today, but we're ready to continue to host large-scale events in our city because we are built to host at every single turn. I want to again thank all of those who responded to the FBI's call for information and tips. As you heard, that has been useful. Continue to do that. The investigation is still active and absolutely under the FBI's leadership. We will continue to operate and cooperate as we always have. So I want to also thank all of our partners for the added resources for victim and crisis management. We know that that's again important. Working with our partner, the Greater New Orleans Foundation, we have set up a fund for our victims' families for not only today but into the future. As you heard, this is going to be a long process for our people. So with that, the city of New Orleans, and with all of my confidence, we are ready. And we could not get here again without the unified presence, support, and cooperation. We are stronger together. And I want to say again, thank you so much. Thank you, Governor. So once again, the governor would like me to reiterate that Bourbon Street will be prepared for full activation before game time today. We know 3 p.m., so we're working towards 2:30 p.m. But prior to game time, the kickoff, Bourbon Street will be restored. So we're hard at work now. Our teams are now, and of course, working with our business community to serve our public and serve our residents and our visitors alike.
In closing, I want to rest people assured. Right now in the city of New Orleans, there's an unprecedented amount of law enforcement resources that are being utilized to close out and to hunt down and to finalize this investigation. I want to thank the FBI and all of our federal partners for the amount of resources they have poured into the city. This type of event can happen in any city. And that's the tragedy of it. And I think it's important for people to understand that to protect our citizens in America from evil, you have to crush it. You can't go out there and placate it. You can't go out there and say, oh, I'm going to put this in place and that in place and hope that evil doesn't show up on your doorstep, because it will. You have to crush it. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to put it all behind us. We're going to continue to keep the victims, those that are in the hospital, either fighting for their lives or trying to recover, in our thoughts and in our prayers. But you know, this morning, and I don't want to single out just one news source, but I just happened to turn on Fox and Friends, and there was a young man who was interviewed, who was actually on Bourbon Street during this horrific act of terrorism. And they closed out by asking him, what now? And I think he summed it up. He said, look, we can't live in fear, because fear will paralyze us. He said, we come down to the city to enjoy ourselves and to entertain ourselves and to be with our friends and with our families, because that's who we are. Louisiana invented hospitality. The people in this city care for each other. And believe you me, we care about each one of the lives that were lost in the city of that. We will never forget them. But it would be a tragedy if we let their losses be snuffed out because of fear. This city will be back. We will be open to family and friends and loved ones who want some time to relax from the pressures of life. And so today, we're going to have us a sugar bowl. We're going to enjoy ourselves. We're going to keep those, again, who have lost loved ones in mind. and we're going to get on to the business of this city and this great country. With that, I'll take any questions.
Governor, this is for you and the Assistant Director. The message has really changed since yesterday. Yesterday, the FBI said that people should be vigilant, that he did not act alone, that he likely had help, and now you're coming out the very next day and saying he was a lone wolf, everything is safe, the game moves on, everybody have a good time. How can you be so sure just 12 hours later?
Well, we're going to bring him up, all right? But here's what I want to remind everyone. Like I was a deputy sheriff, right? I worked in a jail, I worked on the street, I worked on the interstate, I served warrants. I can tell you. Look, in today's world, I get it. Information, we get information like that. Everybody lives in a 15-second TikTok video. We think that life operates like it does on our phones, and it just doesn't. Information changes. In fact, that's why we ask the media for patience. We get information, like I said, no one dumps 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and puts it together in 5 seconds. Okay? And what I would tell you is that I appreciate the fact that what we did was we're under-promising and over-delivering today. And I think that's important. And I want to remind something, look, because over the last decade, law enforcement has taken it on the chin, unfairly. And there are great men and women serving in the FBI, in ATF, in Louisiana State Police, in New Orleans PD. Our sheriffs have been unbelievable in this. And I tell you, they want to protect you all. And we have to trust them. And sometimes the information we put out, we end up finding out that it may be incorrect. But guess what? What we're doing here is something that I think is important. It's called transparency. And look, something may change again. Here's what I do know, though. Right now, this is one of the safest places on earth. That doesn't mean that nothing can't happen.
Thank you, Governor. And to echo exactly, I think the governor put it eloquently, as Khabib said. In a lot of these instances, I also had the opportunity to play a boss bomb, and I will tell you this is almost carbon copy to boss bomb as far as the inaccurate reporting that comes up. And what the governor said is we want to be transparent with the public. Years of the FBI not being transparent, we're being as transparent as we possibly can. Unfortunately, as we're being transparent, unfortunately for that, there is some information that we have to go back and recorrect. And in this particular incident, you heard the resources that we brought, that the other state and locals have brought. We've had 24 hours now to go through media, to go through phones, to interview people, to analyze those videos, analyze other databases. And after all of that, there's been hundreds and hundreds of leads done just in 24 hours. We're confident at this point that there's no accomplices. And I'll give you an idea of how that information sometimes, a lot of the early reports came out that there were extra people that were setting the coolers down, right? It turns out those were just patrons on the street that were looking inside the coolers, right? Well, we didn't know that at first, so we had to kind of track all that down and put that to rest. So that's just an example, one of the pieces of information, but there were other pieces of information that after we got our feet under us a little bit and on the ground here, we were able to put together a much more accurate picture of the subject and his attention.
Just one follow-up. What's the suspect?
The updated death toll, we just wanted to double check that.
Yes.
So 14, not 15. Sorry, sir.
14, and then the shooter himself would be 15 total, to include the shooter.
And to clarify, was the terrorist wearing a suicide vest?
The IEDs, were the IEDs pipe bombs, and have you discovered a remote detonator anywhere? And when you said that you have surveillance footage of the suspect planting those IEDs, what time roughly were they planted?
Yeah, those roughly a couple hours, I don't have the exact times in front of me, a couple hours prior to the attack.
Before midnight?
Probably after midnight. I want to say 1 or 2 in the morning,
so
but I can't.
So he left the area and came back?
Correct. That's our assumption now. I mean, we still have a lot to work through. We're getting more surveillance video and everything else, but that's the assumption.
Was he wearing a suicide vest? Were there sweeps being done on Bourbon Street? Would there have been canines out on New Year's Eve? Would there have been bomb sweeps done?
Look, I think
the regular precautions.
Let me just say this, and either Joe or Rob will correct me. Look, a bomb dog doesn't operate like a drug dog, right? on Bourbon Street has a lot of senses, right? A lot of smells. I don't think you can run a bomb dog down Bourbon Street with thousands of people there and be able to sniff out a bomb. What we've been doing, what they have been doing, is certainly a complete sweep of the quarter because of the limited amount of traffic that's been out there. Let me just say this. I think this may help. It would be my hope that as some additional time goes through, maybe closer to maybe the beginning of next week, we will, if we've got it to what extent buttoned up as we could, I would work with the FBI and the city, and maybe we can come up with a timeline to be able to get you those information, kind of walk everyone through from day one through. I think it's extremely premature, and you're really putting us on some speculative grounds to ask some of those questions, because again, it's only been 24 hours. I mean, can you imagine how far we've come in 24 hours?
So, just clarify if there was pipe bombs and a remote detonator. Was he wearing
What is being done to make Bourbon Street safer tonight than it was New Year's Eve? Are temporary bollards being brought in to block off the street, and why weren't those used on New Year's Eve?
Well, look, here's what I'm going to say. Every time some bad guy does something like this, there's what we call an after-action review. Because again, nothing is 100%. We have reinforced the area. We have deployed some additional types of assets. I personally think it's up to the city or other. I don't like to give specifics because I don't like to tell the enemy what we got. But I can tell you we're in better shape than we were before.
We have time for two more questions.
Can you speak to the Mandeville scene? And some neighbors at that site told us they smelled smoke early in the morning. Was there a fire there? Any kind of burning happening?
Do you still believe that fire happened after the suspect was killed?
That's correct. Yeah, I'll move to 18. I do want to address the suicide vest question. I want to kill that one right away. Okay. There was no evidence that the subject was wearing a suicide vest at all. So I will turn the Mandeville stuff over to ATF.
Yeah, as to the fire at the Mandeville scene, so our working theory now is that the fire started after Jabbar was already deceased. There's a lot of different ways that can happen. You could have different time devices. You could have a long cord that extended that time. You could also have pressure cookers that were put on top of the stove filled with gasoline, and then it went off. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but that is why our ATF National Response Team is here to answer those questions and get that investigative lead back to our team. So more to come on that. We're still processing that scene. We're out there right now.
Are you how he became radicalized over all of this time? What brought him to Bourbon Street? Do we understand? Was there any international travel involved? What led him down this path to the sort of radicalization?
Sure, a lot of questions we're still asking ourselves. We know that he specifically picked out Bourbon Street. Not quite sure why. I mean, I think one can assume that it was lots of people New Year's Eve, with a target for an attack. That's the stuff in the coming days, as far as that path to radicalization, that we're really going to be digging into and making a priority of. So, what I can tell you right now is that he was 100% inspired by ISIS, and so we're digging through more of the social media, more interviews, working with some of our other partners to ascertain just how to ascertain a little bit more about that connection.
We're going to do one more. Kate? Right there. You've had your hand up for a while. Sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's actually for Special Agent Ryan. Sir,
I prefer those.
In order to reassure people, would you be able to explain the analysis and evidence that has led to this most recent understanding that he was a lone actor and that there is at this point, at least from your understanding, no further danger to the public?
Sure. I think a lot of that, multiple interviews, the hundreds of interviews that we've conducted so far, the social media review that we've done of his accounts, by my count now, the 5 devices we have, the 3 cell phones and the 2 laptops, been able to initially triage or go through that, and there is just nothing to indicate through call records, through anything on those devices, through interviews, through anything in our systems that he was aided in this attack by anybody. And again, I have to caveat, like the governor said, this is 24 hours into it, and that could change. But right now, we've got a much better picture and much more confidence on what we were dealing with than we were just 24 hours ago.
Thank you so very much. Again, we're going to try to get y'all as much information as possible. So any additional information we put out through press releases. Thank you so very much.
Moving forward, are we going to be making Bourbon Street pedestrian only, or are we going to be allowing cars to drive through?
Live right now, that press briefing wrapping up right now. Governor Jeff Landry, also Mayor LaToya Cantrell, and authorities from the FBI and ATF.
It's possible to make sure that you don't get held up trying to get into the game.
That is a sign of progress. Bourbon Street reopening. We're also learning more about the investigation into the driver of the truck here. Authorities telling us that they did recover 5 pieces of technology, laptops and phones here. They've gone through both of them. All of them, rather. They were discovered at the home on Mandeville Street that the investigation continues to zero in on right now. And they have concluded, according to authorities, that Jabbar acted alone, and they were able to reach that conclusion by sweeping through his laptops and his phones. That's a key detail because it also tells us much more about why they're still at that house on Mandeville Street here in New Orleans, and that's what they're looking into right now.
You know, I think it's important that the FBI had mentioned that they are hoping to speak with people who might have known him, who maybe crossed paths with him, worked with him at any point. So if you are one of those individuals, or maybe you know someone, encourage them to call 1-800-CALL-FBI. You can also give a digital tip to the FBI as they are still trying to get all this investigation, all these pieces of the investigation. There's so many elements, as you're just hearing, all the way from Houston, the rented vehicle, the house in Mandeville. I mean, there's so many, or on Mandeville Street, there's so many elements to this. And they want to speak with anyone who maybe was in the French Quarter around this time on Bourbon Street, or maybe if you were someone who walked past one of those coolers that held the IEDs in them. They said a number of people are caught on surveillance video, even stopping and looking at the coolers, wondering what's going on, and then they continue to walk. So they're accepting those digital tips to FBI.com/Bourbon Street attack.
They've already received some 400 tips from the public, and they do invite you to keep them coming. Authorities also provided a better timeline as to the suspects' goings on here, driving to New Orleans from the Houston area, and they were able to confirm that he picked up that truck, rented the truck on December 30th, drove to New Orleans from Texas, it's believed, according to law enforcement, on December 31st. They were able to track down videos that he allegedly posted to his social media online. 5 videos, excuse me, in particular, in which he claims his support for ISIS. In that first video, according to authorities from the FBI, he is accused of saying that he had initially planned to harm his family and friends, but he said in that video, according to investigators, that he didn't think the news coverage would focus on what he described in that video as a war between believers and non-believers, according to the FBI. And based on their investigation and the intelligence that they've been able to cobble together thus far, they say that Jabbar joined ISIS this summer. Also, they say that he has provided, within the investigation and what they've been able to uncover about him, a will and testament about his intentions carried out on the streets of New Orleans yesterday.
You know, and you highlighted that point that they sort of reiterated during this press conference, as we're hearing from the FBI, also ATF agents, and the governor, Governor Jeff Landry. They're saying that they do believe at this stage in the investigation that he worked alone. There is some confusion from initial reports that there had been video of other people, other individuals placing those IEDs, those 2 that were found further down Bourbon Street where the attack initially happened. Now officials saying they have the video surveillance of only him placing those IEDs in place. But it's also been highlighted during this press conference, as you heard several times there, that this is very early on in the investigation. We're just a little over 24 hours from when all of this happened. And there's a lot of elements to this as well, as far as where he traveled, where he stayed, where he rented from, his motives, his purpose, these videos that they've uncovered, the timeline. And so it's something that they are still working to put together. We've been talking this morning about the potential connection to that Cybertruck explosion outside the Trump Hotel there in Las Vegas. They're saying right now from the FBI special agent who we heard from that they do not believe the connection is there between Las Vegas and here in New Orleans, but they said that is just the belief at this point. So I think a lot of this is just a little bit of a waiting game, although we are dealing with real families who have lost loved ones in such a horrific way and hurt our city and those who love this city. And so there is that desire for answers and quick answers, and I want to know the details, but there is a moment where we all need to take a deep breath and just slow down and allow law enforcement and those authorities to do their job.
As far as that is concerned, a bit of frustration from the governor, it seemed, and people in the room amidst some of the questions there. That first question asking if there was a change in approach here as far as the investigation is concerned and how they were going about doing this. The governor saying not quite. As a matter of fact, what they're trying to do right now is provide as much information as they possibly can, but with the understanding that there are so many moving parts here. For one thing, who is this guy? Why did he do this? Spanning multiple states here. And when we talk about the house on Mandeville Street, this call initially came as a call for firefighters to come out there because there was a fire at the house. So the question would be, if he acted alone and the fire took place after the incident on Bourbon Street, then how is it that he had a tie to the house but he was already dead? So officials say that they're looking into multiple situations as far as that concerned, how that fire could have started. They do, though, believe that the fire began at the house on Mandeville Street after Jabbar was killed by police on the scene during that shootout. But they're looking at several options as to how it could have happened, and that's why they're still at that house. It could have been one of the explosive devices. It could have been anything. And so they're still there looking into what may have started the fire, which again also provides greater detail about Jabbar, too, who acted alone. Officials looking into what they're calling, quote, a path of radicalization this morning.
Yeah, and you heard the ATF agent there say there could have been a number of reasons for that. It doesn't necessarily have to be that somebody else was involved, but as you mentioned, they're still investigating. It could have been a delayed device. There could have been other ways that he intended to set that home on fire. As you mentioned, there were multiple devices found, including those 2 laptops, 3 phones that have been connected to him that they are now combing to get some of that information. But maybe that's why he was intending to set the house on fire to get rid of evidence. We don't know. That's all part of this investigation. There seems to be a lot that will come out of this, of course. And we did hear from the governor as he was responding to some of these questions, some in what seemed frustration. He said, you know, maybe at some point we'll be able to take a moment to walk back and go over all of the measures that were put in place or what future measures could be in place. So plenty more to come out of this.
We do thank you for joining us here on WWL and WWL Plus. Our live coverage continues on all of our platforms today. If you are watching on WWL television, we are going to leave you and go to regularly scheduled programming until the WWL Louisiana News at noon. However, our live coverage does continue right now on WWL Plus, also live, WWLTV.com, as officials are updating us on this investigation. 14 people killed by a man who decided to rent a truck from Texas, drive it to New Orleans, carry out what officials do confirm was very much so an intentional attack. Crime scene that spans multiple locations this morning. Stay with us. We're going to continue our coverage here.
This has been breaking news from WWL Louisiana.
.07 the time now as we continue our team coverage here on this Thursday morning on WWL Plus after officials just wrapped a very sweeping press conference updating us on the investigation into yesterday's massacre on Bourbon Street.
Thank you for continuing to stay with us as we're learning more about that terror attack. And now we have a timeline from officials, including some answers to many of the questions we have been asking, along with you at home who have been watching this all unfold. And so we're hearing, we did hear from Governor Jeff Landry, along with the FBI, ATF agents, and Mayor LaToya Cantrell. Moving forward, the next step with the Sugar Bowl for many who are in town, hoping to enjoy that game, as that game was abruptly pushed and moved to today. That kickoff is at 3 p.m., but we have learned that Bourbon Street will open at 2:30. So trying to move forward in the midst of still deep in this investigation.
And Mayor LaToya Cantrell talking about that need to move forward, but also the rapid response of first responders there on scene who are and who did work desperately to clear the scene there. But we're not just talking about clearing up paper and other debris that was there on the ground. They also had to recover the bodies of those who were killed. And also they had to work to identify them. They also had to work to find their loved ones and get in touch with them. And after they got that done, the FBI was able to turn over control of Bourbon Street back to the city of New Orleans. And that is when they were able to go in, and you saw this morning the live video of the sanitation crews sweeping the streets, a sign of authorities attempting to move back to some sense of normalcy in downtown New Orleans now that we are well over a day now after the situation. But things are still very early here as the facts are beginning to pour in, and our reporters are beginning to get more information there on the ground.
Yeah, one of those being Leah McNeil, who's been at work since very early in the morning hours, trying to just get an idea of exactly what's happening right there at Bourbon and Canal, where we know this attack first took place. Leah, what's the very latest?
Well, guys, we now know from that recent press conference from city officials and, of course, the FBI that Bourbon Street is set to reopen at 2:30. That's 30 minutes before the Sugar Bowl game is set to get going. As you can see, though, still law enforcement presence out here on scene, still multiple rows of crime scene tape as well. We do still see state police here on scene blocking the entrance of Bourbon Street right now, as well as a JPSO unit out here at the very front, at the foot of Bourbon Street, where it does meet Canal. Now, just hearing from those law enforcement officials, again, we do know that they did lay out a timeline for this attack, also mentioning that the suspect that we now know as a 42-year-old from Texas, an Army veteran who did ram his rented vehicle into a crowd of people on Bourbon Street on New Year's Day. Shamsud Din Jabbar is his name. We're still, of course, waiting for more information because we still have questions. I did notice that special agents did mention that he did post his support to ISIS on social media, still trying to figure out if that was flagged by federal officials, if that was flagged by local officials. How did that slip through the cracks? How was he able to post that on the way to the city of New Orleans without that have being seen or without that being realized earlier in this situation? So still questions that we have for law enforcement, of course, federal agents, as they did mention that they are still actively investigating this. We also learned that, of course, they do say that the initial people that they thought were involved were looking into those coolers. They initially said it was 3 men and a woman. They have since cleared those people, saying that they do believe that Jabbar did act alone in this case. Still, nonetheless, 14 families and, of course, the 30-plus people injured here are still trying to find a sense of normalcy, trying to wrap their heads around what happened here behind this tragic event that unfolded here at Canal and Bourbon Street. Throughout the morning, we've been seeing crews kind of prep to reopen Bourbon at 2:30 this afternoon. Again, that the mayor has since said that that's the time that they are planning to reopen Bourbon. But again, as we've seen with this investigation, things are fluid and they can change. So as of right now, with your time now being 11:12, the mayor is expected to go ahead and reopen Bourbon Street at that time. Still, of course, with an enhanced law enforcement presence, still seeing those state troopers, NOPD officers, as well as an enhanced presence from the Louisiana National Guard out here, both around the quarter and, of course, closer toward the Superdome, where that Sugar Bowl game is expected to get started at 3 p.m. this afternoon. For now, reporting live in the French Quarter, Leah McNeil, WWL, Louisiana.
All right, Leah, thank you. We do appreciate your reporting. Also thinking about the reporters, our colleagues who have been out there for hours as they're working to get to the very bottom of this. This also means that they have to continue to revisit this tragedy as people are playing out their experiences to them. But also, it's not easy any given day to report the news, to be out there in that situation, and to be out there in that situation for as long as Leah, Mike, and the rest of the news team have been out there. It very much so speaks to their commitment and the work that they've put in over the hours here.
Absolutely, working really hard to get answers for a city that so deserves it. You know, one of those that we have been working is to speak with those who have been affected, trying to identify all of the victims. Whitney Miller has more on that.
At least 15 people have died in this senseless tragedy. The names of these people are slowly being identified as families are being notified. The first death we confirmed was of 18-year-old Nakira Cheyenne Dido. She's from Gulfport, Mississippi, and a recent graduate of Harrison Central High School. Her mother told our partners at NOLA.com that she was sweet and loving. She said the teen was visiting New Orleans with her cousin and a friend. Then there is 37-year-old father of two Reggie Hunter from Baton Rouge. A cousin of his told our partners he decided on a whim to go to Bourbon Street. He and another cousin were hit by the truck. Hunter died. His cousin is in the hospital with extensive injuries. The third fatality we know about is 27-year-old Tiger Besh, a Lafayette native and former St. Thomas More football star. Besh died at the hospital from his injuries. His athletic director confirmed his death. She says he was in New Orleans for the holidays. Besh played wide receiver, quarterback, punt returner, and defensive back at STM. He went on to play football at Princeton, and he graduated in 2021, and he was working as a trader at a New York brokerage firm.
First catch of the season for Besh.
And then there's 25-year-old Matthew Tenedorio. He's the youngest of three boys and a Pearl River Central grad. For most of Wednesday, his family hadn't heard from him. And then they got the tragic news. And then there's Nicole Perez, a 28-year-old mother from Metairie who died in the attack. Perez had just been promoted to manager at Kimmy's Deli at Lakeway. Her 4-year-old son is in the care of a loved one, and she was remembered as a good mom and wanted to be successful. And finally, we learned about Kareem Bawadi, one of the two Episcopal School of Baton Rouge alumni victims who died as a result of their injuries. A prayer service will be held at the Lewis Family Memorial Chapel on Thursday at 6 p.m.
We have also learned the identity of a seventh victim, Hubert Guttrow. He was 21 years old. His family had initially posted on social media that he was missing, but later they confirmed that he was one of the victims in this terror attack. He was a 2021 graduate of Archbishop Shaw High School. Now, in addition to the 14 people killed in the attack on Bourbon Street yesterday, more than 35 others have been injured.
Meg Ferris has more on area hospitals that are working to make sure that they are taken care of.
It has been an extremely busy day here at the Level 1 Trauma Center at UMC. Originally, 26 people were brought here with injuries. Many of them had critical injuries. Now, 4 were brought to Truro, 4 to Oxnard Baptist, and 1 to Tulane. We do know that since the original 10 who were reported killed in this incident, another 5 has been added to that list. Now, 2 policemen were brought here after being caught in that gunfire exchange with the perpetrator. 1 has since gone home and is reporting that he is on the mend, doing well, and he says, "I love you" to all the people who have been thinking about him and texting him. Now, there's a family reunification center here at UMC for people who could not find loved ones. It's in the middle of the hospital on the first floor. Probably the most impressive thing that has happened today is after our call at around 10:30 this morning for people to go donate blood, many people, dozens and dozens, turned out to the donation centers to give blood. It was already critically low earlier because of its being a holiday. And during holidays, fewer people go donate blood because they're busy with Christmas and that type of thing. But after our call out for the critically low blood situation, People came by the dozens and rolled up their sleeves.
What we need the public to understand right now is this is a perfect scenario where you see that what the need is in this community. It's a continuous, ongoing need. It's a gift that you're going to give that someone can not get anywhere else, so you can't go buy it off the shelf. This comes from your heart.
Now, you can go to our website, wwltv.com, and there you will find a list of all the blood donation centers and the times, and they will be open for the next few days, asking for you to please come and donate if you did not do so today. Reporting from UMC, Meg Farris, WWL, Louisiana.
You know, people around New Orleans and across the country, they've all been looking for ways to support the victims of this attack.
Yeah, the Blood Center, they're hosting an emergency blood drive today to address an already critical need for blood following this tragedy. It's even greater here. Our Meg Farris had a busy day yesterday. She was live at the headquarters, showed you the coolers that were nearly empty. And after that, many of you showed up at the facility in Metairie to donate yesterday. And if you would like to do the same today, all New Orleans area locations are going to be open until 7 p.m. A few exceptions here. The Pelican Athletic Club in Mandeville and the Blood Center corporate office, they both close at 5. Also, the New Orleans St. Vincent de Paul location on Canal Street closes at 6. You can also help by donating to the United Way of Southeast Louisiana. They're accepting donations for those victims. 100% of what is collected will go toward helping families, also the victims who did survive, those 30 some odd people. If you'd like to support, there is a link for you on our website today.
You can also help by donating to the Greater New Orleans Foundation. They've launched a New Year's Day tragedy fund to help the victims of the attack. Saints player Cam Jordan, he announced that he's donating $25,000 to the fund. He also called on the city of New Orleans to do the same and help how they can.
Now, Governor Jeff Landry and other officials, as they did address reporters minutes ago, did point out the very real understanding that the Sugar Bowl is set for 3 o'clock today. The idea is for Bourbon Street to reopen by 2:30, and authorities saying that they did conduct extensive sweeps of the Superdome and that things are ready to go for the many people who are here in town for the game, including the family of some of those players who are playing today.
Yeah, they did reiterate that they believe everything will be safe and it is a safe place to be later today if you are attending the Sugar Bowl. Adam Reif with our CBS affiliate in Wisconsin spoke to the parents of a Notre Dame player.
We woke up to text messages this morning from friends and stuff. Are we okay and this and that?
The Shrouth family's New Year's Eve trip to New Orleans was supposed to be a celebration, but now
the authorities have asked that we stay in our hotels today as much as possible.
Campbellsport native Billy Shrouth has been a key cog in leading Notre Dame this season. His parents Jenna and Tim spent part of Tuesday afternoon in the French Quarter before heading back to their hotel.
And it was just a ton of people. But we were not down there last evening.
It feels familiar to many in southeastern Wisconsin. The similarities to the 2021 Waukesha Christmas parade attack are undeniable.
Suspect goes around a police barricade. Law enforcement is present and still has managed to get on the parade route.
Former Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Brian Doro said the motives behind the two may be different, but trying to prevent them is the same.
But you're going to see changes in the way we do business and perhaps even industry standards for what is needed.
Doro said physical barriers and a law enforcement presence can only do so much to prevent an attack, especially if the attacker has little regard for their own life. The Dancing Grannies posted about the New Orleans attack, writing, "It's a long, hard road. While you will never be the same, healing is possible." The Sugar Bowl game was postponed and rescheduled for Thursday at 3 p.m. local time. There is still uncertainty and concern on the streets of New Orleans, but the Shrouths will be in the stands cheering on Billy while also being cognizant of their surroundings.
Hopefully they're hollow threats, but obviously there's concern for everybody's safety.
Adam Reif reporting from a CBS station there in Wisconsin this morning, speaking to the parents of one of the players for Notre Dame. They're going to play 3 o'clock. The Sugar Bowl is set to go over at the Superdome.
And as we have been telling you all morning, 14 people were killed in this attack. So far, only 7 of them have been identified. One of the people who tragically lost their life was Tiger Besh.
Besh played football at St. Thomas More in Lafayette before going on to play at Princeton. Lane Miller from our sister station KLFY in Lafayette has more on the community's support for him and his family.
The community gathered in prayer here at St. Thomas More to mourn the loss of Tiger Besh.
We needed to get together and do the number one thing that we can do for him, and that's pray.
Family and friends did just that, filling the chapel pews as they prayed the rosary for Tiger and his family. Others prayed over the Besh family in person.
We have some staff members that are very close with the family and have remained close. Our chaplain, Father Andrew Schumacher, also went to New Orleans to be with the family and just show support, be there for them.
St. Thomas More principal Marty Cannon was Tiger's coach senior year of high school. Cannon says Besh was special.
I don't think there's ever been anybody like Tiger. I don't think there's ever going to be anybody like him, because between the athlete, and the depth and the character and just the way he held himself, he was a special guy.
As a school with around 100,000 alumni, Cannon says Tiger is one they won't forget.
Tiger left a huge mark on a lot of us. We could go on and on about how great of an athlete he was, but he was way more than that. He was a complete guy, and he was a stand-up guy that we really respected and honored, and we really liked. I can only imagine that it gives some consolation and some healing to the Besh family.
Cannon says losing Besh was not just a loss to STM, but the entire community.
Lane Miller reporting for us, and authorities had set up the 311 for you to call if you were looking for the whereabouts of anyone who was a victim of yesterday's attack. So that's that number, call 311 if you're in the city of New Orleans.
Yeah, and if you're not, 504-539-3266.
We do want to continue our coverage this morning. Our reporters throughout the area, we heard from Leah McNeil at Bourbon and Canal. Now let's get to our Mike McDaniel, who is reporting for us at Bourbon and Dumaine. Mike, authorities did say that they opened up the Bourbon Street and returned it to the city of New Orleans at around 8:30. Have things changed out there since?
Oh yeah, there's a lot more folks out here now ready for Bourbon Street to finally be opened. Of course, we got the good news from the city that we know that that's going to happen just before kickoff inside the Superdome as the Sugar Bowl gets underway. That about 2:30. Of course, vendors are going to be allowed first to service these businesses that have been shuttered since this tragic incident played out about 9 blocks from where we are down Bourbon Street right now. You heard the mayor talk a little bit earlier during that news conference about having the FBI clear the scene first and then handing the street back over to the city of New Orleans. That then gave the city the opportunity to get those garbage trucks, the trash trucks, the cleaning crews in here to really get everything cleaned up and ready to go. We were here as that process played out. That was around 3, 4, 5 o'clock, or about 5 o'clock this morning as we were doing live shots throughout our morning news program. And you can see behind me right now, it's still kind of blocked off. Officers are out here. State troopers are kind of positioned along the way from here all the way down to Canal, just waiting to get the green light from authorities here in the city or city leaders that it can be finally reopened to pedestrian traffic. Of course, that's going to be a lot of good news coming off of what happened yesterday, because when you have that lengthy amount of time for a lot of businesses down here on Bourbon Street, it really starts to create an impact. And of course, people want to get out. They want to get out and enjoy their day, especially when you have the Sugar Bowl happening here in the city of New Orleans. So right now it's a wait and see kind of notion. There are a lot of folks kind of surrounding us behind the camera right now, taking photos down Bourbon Street, because you really don't see it like this. This is not a view that you normally get. It's very remindful of how it was when we were in the height of COVID. That's the only thing I can compare it to. Of course, completely different circumstances here, because we now know a terror attack is what led to the closure of Bourbon Street just more than 24 hours now. We do know that that's going to be lifted. Folks are going to be excited about that. It's a beautiful day out here, but we still have that dark cloud metaphorically hanging over the city of New Orleans, considering the tragedy that this city and now multiple many families and loved ones are now having to deal with, guys.
All right, Mike McDaniel, we do thank you for your reporting. Mike is at Bourbon and Dumaine. That is 8 blocks east from where Leah is at Canal and Bourbon this morning.
Yeah, Leah has been there all morning, right where this attack started, right there, as you mentioned, Bourbon and Canal. And we're still waiting to hear more about when that street will open, what that will look like for a number of people. We know that's going to happen in a few hours, but Leah, we still see that tape up there behind you. It doesn't quite look the same as where Mike is. It seems like yours is a bit quieter.
Yeah, definitely. So we still very much see that heavy law enforcement presence here behind me. Mike mentioned that this is just not something that you see very often. Bourbon Street shut down, of course, unfortunately, a result of that terrorist attack this time. But we're starting to hear and see the sights and sounds of things slowly returning to how we're used to seeing it. Just, I want to say a few minutes ago, I actually heard some of the drumming that you typically hear as you walk down Bourbon Street, the kids drumming on top of the buckets. We did hear that a little bit earlier. Some of the music spilling out of the businesses that line Canal Street right up until you get to Bourbon. So, and a lot of people walking around on both sides of the street, of course, anticipating the reopening of Bourbon Street. The FBI has since cleared that street and has returned over control to the New Orleans Police Department. The mayor has since said that she is expecting Bourbon to reopen at 2:30. That is about 30 minutes before kickoff for the Sugar Bowl. And as you can see, there are people spilling out of the hotels in their Georgia gear and their Notre Dame gear, getting ready to go to that game, assuming some of them, of course, have still been able to stay despite that game being postponed yesterday. But still, Mike mentioned still very much that metaphorical dark cloud just still hanging over despite the beautiful day we have right now. Law enforcement is still out here, still several state troopers out here, NOPD officers, federal agents, Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office. So still a heavy law enforcement presence here to make sure everyone is safe as they continue on. Back to you all.
All right, Leah McNeil, thank you. Reporting there from Canal and Bourbon, has been there since yesterday. We are, of course, following the latest developments on this investigation throughout the day right here on WWL Louisiana, all of our platforms, in fact.
And we have mentioned that you can follow our app. We'll be on WWL Plus, and we do have our news at noon. But also, just to reiterate, the FBI is still looking for anybody who might have any information, who was there in the French Quarter during this attack, who maybe saw those coolers with IEDs in them. And so they both have an option to call, or you can give them a tip digitally. So if maybe you are someone who was there around that area, just please give any information that you have.
That number, 1-800-CALL-FBI, or you can send your tips to fbi.gov/Bourbon Street attack. We're going to be back at noon.